surface of the water, and we tested that crust, and it was aluminum and barium that after a year and a half's accumulation had 375,000 parts per billion of aluminum in it. It's literally toxic. We can say conclusively that what we see in the sky matches expressly what's outlined in numerous patents, and the materials on the ground match those patents. This material was not there 5 years ago. It is a recent phenomenon in the quantities it's in. It has escalated in some cases 50,000% in 5 years in the case of aluminum. From our original baseline reading of 7 parts per billion, which was already high, it has escalated up to 50,000% in 5 years. And we've seen profound changes in that time.
Dr. Leonard Time, PhD in chemistry, I cross-checked with him, and he says the oxides of aluminum, barium, and strontium will drive your pH into the from an acid soil like this up into the neutral. There's no question about it.
And that's exactly...
That's exactly what you see happening.
Wow.
I have a doctorate in inorganic chemistry from Oregon State University, in which I was working with different metals and oxidation states, and then did a postdoctorate work at Brandeis, where I was working stabilizing off oxidation states of different metals. The goal is to sort of figure out how everything fits in the dynamic equilibrium of life. I was working with Francis up in Mount Shasta, and he showed me some rainwater analyses that had to do with levels of aluminum, strontium, and barium in the atmosphere. So I feel the major toxin in these chemtrails is the aluminum. And from the levels we were looking in at Mount Shasta, this is totally, totally unacceptable. When you get to metals and biological systems, you're no longer talking about the bulk aluminum that people think about when they're drinking from soda pop cans and that. So once it gets to the aluminum oxide stage, it just forms a plaque within your arteries and shuts down life. When you take elements that normally aren't out in the environment and you start putting them in the environment, it raises some serious red flags. Aluminum is a very specific nasty in biological systems. It takes that site and it never lets go, and it shuts down the site, and that's it. And so as you accumulate aluminum over time, it causes major neurological damage because it ends up as aluminum oxide that's essentially stuck in place and can't be flushed out by normal systems.
At the core of everyone's condition, there's always some level of toxins. And aluminum is known to have cancer-causing effects. The half-life is decades. I think that we should be working on taking more of these toxins out of our environment instead of adding more toxins in. It's very concerning that if we add more toxins to our environment, that will be increasing the rates and risks of cancers. Even one patient is not worth it. So sad that they would consider putting aluminum in our environment to affect something when they could be causing so much more damage.
Wherever the material is coming from, it is there. The amount of metal falling on us cannot be disputed. Absolutely, this is not speculation. The amount of metal in the last 4 years, as I said, have increased to a degree of thousands of times, and California Air Quality Resources Board has studied the aerosols from China. These metals are not amongst them. Mike, the reason I've chosen to focus so primarily on this issue is I feel all other issues are secondary. What could be a greater priority than not being able to walk out your door and take in a breath of air without sucking up heavy metals? If our land base is being poisoned, if our waters are being toxified, what will we have left to work with? Whatever we choose to focus our time and energy on, whatever our political beliefs, that this is a common ground for all of us. We must have air that we can breathe, that's not full of toxic chemicals and metals. We must have water that's not completely laden with whatever is being emitted from these aircraft. And if people stopped to consider that the atmosphere is as thin as a layer of paint on a basketball, It is an extremely thin layer that allows life to exist on this planet. To simply treat it as a physics lab and experiment with it until it is broken beyond repair is folly of unbelievable proportion. And if people understood that this sort of experimentation not only is going on, but has been going on for a very, very long time. Going back 50 years, there's been countless climate manipulation, weather modification programs that the vast majority of the public is completely unaware of. And if they think that this is not true, that certainly that somehow they would have known if it was occurring, I would ask them to look at things like Agent Orange and the things that governments do because they can, because there's no one to stop them, because they have these huge military machines that want to control everything. And in fact, the government's own document, perhaps you may have seen, it's available to any online, is called Owning the Weather, an expressed goal of our government, and not just our government.
He told the Associated Press that the American government has created weather tampering techniques so that the New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans and to control the rest.
There is weather control techniques. Number one, the entire patents on the equipment. Number two, Senator Claiborne Pell's complete statement and story of his own that not only does it exist, but that we even utilized it as far back as the Vietnam War.
Well, Murph,
We're going to do what we can.
let's see what we can do. You got the scientists behind you. The scientists are with you, so at least this scientist is with you. I may not have $1 million budget, but I've got enough to show that something's dreadfully wrong.
You got it. All right.
So Arizona will be this Monday, the 21st. Senator Johnson up in Show Low. So we're going to be in the car a long time. Well, it is such a pleasure.
This is such
to
an
meet you.
excellent place back here, I'm
Yeah,
telling
this
you,
is
Michael.
great.
But you know what?
is great.
We love it. It's so private and it's so quiet and peaceful. And please come in. My name is Karen Johnson. I served in the Arizona State Legislature for 12 years. I was in the House for 8 of those years and in the Senate for 4 of those years. When you see a plane fly overhead, there's a trail that leaves the end of that plane, and it goes from one horizon all the way to the other as the plane flies across, and it begins to filter out and cover more and more of the sky in kind of ripples. It widens out and fills the whole sky. I mean, how could anybody think that that was the case? And then to live and to be underneath that and know that whatever is in that is falling down upon you and upon your animals and upon the earth. And I mean, it's frightening to me. And if people don't start really waking up and facing the fact that we've got people that are doing terrible things to us, and we had better wake up and fight back now. I mean, I'm the mom of 11 kids. I've got 35 grandkids. I mean, I've got a stake in this. I care about what is going to be left for my children. I care about it, and I'm extremely worried about what is going to be left to them.
Aluminum is toxic, and we know that it's accumulative. And we know that we're getting more. So we're absorbing it in the air, we're drinking it in our water, so we are accumulating more. So the thought of more aluminum being dispersed in our environment in the way that you mentioned is very frightening to us and very disturbing to us. Those of us who have done any research on this are really quite concerned that we are ill-informed about this issue, and mostly that it's being done. Aluminum is toxic. We know that it is. We can debate as to the amount of toxicity that is going to be disturbing the body, but as far as really accepting the fact that it's accumulative, it's synergistic, then we have to conclude that it's not a good idea to put it in our atmosphere, especially when we know we're getting increased amounts, and especially since we know that the scientific communities around the world are pointing a finger at the heavy metal toxicities, at the toxicities that we're absorbing in the day-to-day food that we eat and the air that we breathe.
The concern is off the charts about why is this happening? Why is this being allowed to be sprayed continually all over the United States, all over the world? Who is paying for this? I mean, the incidence of Alzheimer's has just skyrocketed, which evidently has to do with an accumulation of aluminum in the brain cells. I mean, I think almost every family has been touched by a member as they get older having Alzheimer's. And it's a horrible disease. And to say that, well, this just came because people drank soda pop out of aluminum cans, you know, when my father passed away with Alzheimer's and he didn't ever drink soda pop, you know, that explanation doesn't ring true with me. And so I'm wondering, how much did this chemtrail spraying back in the Illinois area affect him?
Aluminum and fine metal is an accelerant.
Our friend who's a firefighter up in Pine, Arizona for 20 or 30 years says that the wildfires now that they're fighting are way beyond anything they've seen before in intensity. And when you look at the air samples and you see the fine particles of aluminum, which is very flammable, and magnesium settling on the trees, this is causing unprecedented savage wildfire.
But if you look at this, you can see these are parts per million. They sent this to me, and I just found this to be extremely interesting because we should have like 2 parts per million of aluminum in our air. And this is saying that there's 39,000 parts of aluminum. That's astronomical. Barium is high. I mean, these are way off the charts of what people should be breathing or what's coming down on them. And, you know, if people wonder why their health is deteriorating, why they're having to go to emergency rooms, why they can't breathe, you know, why they're getting Alzheimer's, this has been planned. We have elites, I don't know what you want to call them, one worlders, Illuminati, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. But with these people that don't care about the average person. They only care about themselves, their greed, their power, and if they eliminate, you know, 2/3, 3/4 of us from the planet, so much for the better for them, because then they don't have so many people to have to herd around and worry about. So this is a lot what this is about, and this is very, very alarming and scary. I mean, where is this stuff coming from, and why? Why is this kind of stuff being put out there? You know, I've heard different explanations about, oh, we need to cool the planet, all this and that. But if people are up there trying to cool the planet, why do they need all this kind of stuff in it? The explanations just never have really rang very true.
And as I'm setting up the equipment, she looked at me, she said, all these trees here are dying. And I said, what? She says, all these trees in here are dying. So I thought, well, I'm going to test for aluminum, because that's one of the key things in the programs that we're talking about, and titanium. And I took some of this bark sample and tested it, and it came back positive with aluminum and titanium. Then I started traveling around California, noticing the same thing. In Lake Tahoe, there was a lot of the same type of bark, all through Sacramento area and Davis. Just about everywhere I went, I was noticing this silver white bark. What I think is happening is these chemicals are getting down and destroying the roots. And then as they come up, they're going out into the bark.
Those 2 right there are the ones that are just, it just hurts so bad to see these 2, because look how old and big they are. We probably lost 40 trees right here on our 10 acres. Every week, every other weekend, we'd see another tree that was beginning to die. And I mean, it's just so sad, we just cry. And to think that that might have something to do with it, along with their other explanations, would really, really frost me. Every time you lose a tree, you know, it's not good, it's just sad. And there's another one over here in this little group of trees here. Don't you feel better when you stand up and fight than if you crawl down in a little hole and go to sleep? You know, I mean, my gosh, people, your families are out there, children are out there, your grandchildren. I mean, you've got to do something to help.
My greatest hope is to get people to question
And hey, if they don't wake up while we're there, I'm hoping to plant some seeds. We're going to the most beautiful place on the planet, Hawaii, to